Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and in this video what I want to do is just kind of show you like the basics of how you'd go about making a text-based game with Python. This can get as complicated as you like because it's all about your imagination. But just to show you sort of the basic idea of like you're just building a very simple text-based game. So we'll call this textgame.py. Okay, and probably the most simplest way to build a game is you start off with a loop. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is here we're gonna have a couple different sections. We're gonna have game state, so that's gonna be just basically the stats that you track throughout the game. So like player stats, progress stats, stuff like that. We're gonna have in the game state. Okay, then we're going to have any functions we may use. And actually we're gonna create a class. We're going to create a character class because your player will be a character and there'll be other characters in the game, so we might as well just have like a character class. That way we only have to define all that functionality of how a character in the story works once. And then we're going to actually have what's called the game loop, just because a game is essentially just a big loop. The idea is just basically a code goes through a loop, it asks the user for input, that input then basically triggers the response to that input, which then changes the game state, which when you're playing a visual game changes what you see on the screen. So the screen updates in response to the input, and then the loop goes again and it's looking for input. Okay, so you're playing your favorite video game. Really, it's just looping, looking for that controller input, and then updating the screen based on the response to your input. That's essentially all it is. So essentially, you start off with an infinite loop, while true. There's our infinite loop. Okay, and we'll just put a pass there for now. Okay, and again, in Python, that's a capital T, so make sure that's a capital T. And essentially, this loop will run forever. Okay, and essentially what you would do is at the beginning of each loop, you're going to ask the user for input, and then you respond to that input. Okay, but let's just build out a couple things. Like first off, let's build out the character class. That's probably going to be the most, one of the more important things right off the bat. We should probably, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to have a class name character. Okay, and we'll begin defining it. First thing we want to do is define the constructor, so like basically the function that makes the character. So essentially, whenever I create a character, it's this function that's going to run and assemble the object, which is always a function called init, this dunder init. Okay, and then this function, when it's classes, it is always going to take self first. It's always going to receive itself as an argument first. And then we're going to pass in a name. We'll pass in what are the things we want to be defined right off the bat. We'll make the stats random. Okay. Cool. So then we can just define the properties of the object. So we'll say, hey, the object's name equals whatever we pass in as the name. I'm going to want the random library that's built into Python because we're going to want to use some of these random number functions, which are all escaping me at the moment. So Python random. Python random module. So here you got all these different random functions. Returns a random flow number between 0 and 1. This is for Python, right? Yep. Float number returns a sample number. Shuffle takes a sequence and returns a sequence in a random order. Choices returns a list of random selection from a given sequence. Choice returns a random element from a given sequence. And here we go, random integer between the given range. Okay, cool. So we're going to say like self.strength. Okay, is going to equal random.randint. Okay, and we're going to say it's between 3 and 6. Okay. Defense will be between 1 and 4. Let's actually make this as high as 8. And let's actually make this 4. Okay. And that's going to be for defense. So this is the defense. And we'll leave it at that. We'll keep it simple. Okay. But you can add more stats. Like you can just keep adding more stats. So essentially what happens is that every time you create a new character, it's going to generally, we choose the name, and then the rest are all generated by randomly generated stats. Okay. In this case. Again, however you want to do it. Cool. And then characters should be able to attack each other. Okay, so we're going to want to create a function for like one character attacking another. So def attack. And basically what this will receive is self, it always has itself, and then other, basically whoever you're attacking. So you'd pass in a character object, is the assumption. So I'm going to assume that, again, other is going to equal another character, so it should have a name, a strength, a defense. So assuming that I can do that. Okay. And actually, let's add one more stat. Let's add an accuracy stat. Okay, accuracy. Okay, and then we'll just make that 1 through 10. Okay. And then essentially what you need to do is that every time you the character attacks another, the idea is you have to basically, your accuracy has to be above a randomly generated number. So the idea is that if like I randomly generate 1 and then your accuracy is 8, you successfully hit. Okay? So that way, you're not always guaranteed to hit. So we'll just say if, we'll just generate a random number. So random.randint 1 and 10. Now, if that is less than or equal than self.accuracy, so if it's less than your accuracy, then you've successfully hit. Okay, cool. So now that we've done that, so the question is like, if you've successfully hit, what should happen? So if you successfully hit, generally what should happen is we're going to calculate the damage, okay, which is going to equal self.strength minus the enemy's defense, so minus other.defense, so it's minus their defense. Oh, and of course the other player, each character is going to need HP, so we should probably define that. HP, which will be a number between 10 and 20. Okay, so between 10 and 20. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, whenever we hit the person, then that's going to happen is that other dot defense is going to minus equals the damage. No, not defense, HP. So basically their HP is going to go down by the amount of the damage. And then we should print a message so that way everyone's aware of what happened. So we'll use a format string. So I'll use the F, and we're going to say, we're going to use your name. So we'll say self.name, or whoever the attacker's name, hit, and then we put the other person's name, other.name for damage. They have other.hp left. Okay. So essentially that's what will happen anytime there's an attack. Okay, so basically one player will attack the other player, and we just use this function. Again, that's going to handle all that logic for us, so I don't have to do it for each character. Okay, but in that scenario, I need to define what happens if you miss. Okay, and then we'll just print f um, self.name fails to attack other.name. Cool. Okay, so that works. And that should be it. That's all we're going to need for this really simple game. Okay. And so far there's really like, let me see here. Is there anything I really want to track at a game level? I mean, theoretically we could, again, this will be const like game state, or not const, that's JavaScript. Game state equals, and then this would be a dictionary. And the idea is just anytime you think of something that you might want to track, let's say like the player has like, we want to track gold, because basically you're not tracking the enemy's gold. Not each character has their own individual gold, because you don't need to track, any NPC's gold amount. You just need to track the main player's gold amount. So I would create a dictionary and say gold, and they'll start with 0. Gold. And let's say that's the only thing we have so far. Okay. And again, you could use things like you can track like level here, so like if they can level up. Actually, probably leveling up, you might want to track at the character level because different characters can be different levels. You figure out where it makes sense to track that data. Okay, but you might want to track like their location. So like where's like if the player can explore a dungeon, you might want to track like hey where in the dungeon they are there, things like that. Okay, so we're going to say right now we're going to say location, and then they're just going to start in the arena. We're going to make this a real simple game where there's really only one location. But again, theoretically, what would happen is like if you created like this big map and said, okay, if you turn left, you're in this location, then you would just like update that variable and say, okay, hey, location's now this. And then you could plug that into how other functions work. Cool. Okay, so for example, what I could do is I could create like a location dictionary. And each location, would have, like let's say the arena would be a property in this location object. And we'll just say each one equals a function. So we'll just say like arena equals or we don't even have to do that. What we would just do is we can just map out the whole, basically all locations from here. So we like arena, and then from the arena where can you travel to. So then I would just like list other, and just create, like I would say, hey, from the arena you can go to, the barracks, and if there's nowhere you can go from the barracks, um, um, from the barracks, all you can do is just go, let's say, back to the arena. Okay. And then what you would do, again, you could just keep making different locations. Barracks, arena, um, barracks, arena, and then you can go to like another room. We'll say like the training ground. And again, from there, the only place you can really go to is the arena, back up to the arena. So I feel like we'll just put that there. You create like an object like this that represents your map, so that way you can use this as a way to sort of track where the player can go. And you can create functions that dynamically use this object to kind of be like, okay, well, they're in the arena, so we can identify what locations there should be. The user should have options to, and then give them those options. So that way you don't have to necessarily type up every possible scenario hand by hand. We may go back and do an example that we'll see, because that starts getting longer than this video should be. Okay, but bottom line is we have, you know, again, tracking like global sort of game information. Okay, we have like a dictionary for tracking sort of like the location of the player. We have a class for us to define characters. So one thing I want to do is we're gonna just do a straight up like, hey, I want to battle the person, kind of thing. Okay, so what's gonna happen is functions. We're just gonna have like a. So basically, what's gonna happen is at the end of each loop, we're gonna see, hey, did you win? Okay. So we're gonna have a function called game def. We'll call it win conditions, and it's gonna take self and other because it's gonna compare the two people. Okay. And basically, what it's going to do is that it's going to check first, like, hey, if self.life is less than 1, then you're dead. Okay, so in that case, self.life, so if you're dead, then it would print you have died, you lose. Okay, if other.life, well, it's not even life, it's HP. Other.hp is less than 1, print, I'm going to make that an F string, and then we'll just say, hey, other.name has died. Okay. Now in either of those situations, we will return true. Meaning the game is over. And then if neither of those ifs run, then we'll just return false and the game will just continue. Okay. So now we can now build out the game. Okay, so we're gonna have like the player character. So the player is going, we're gonna first ask the player for their name. So we're gonna say name, player name equals input. What is your name? Okay, so now the player name variable should equal the result of that input. Then we're going to create the player. So player is going to equal a new character. So it'll be character, and then we just pass in the player name. Okay, because that's going to equal that argument that we defined here to the init function. Because again, whenever you create a class, you are essentially triggering that init function. Okay, now we have that. Now we want the villain. So we're just going to say you're fighting a goblin. So goblin equals character. Goblin will be the name. Just do the static name. Actually, see these things we only want to happen once, so I shouldn't put them in the loop. Because if I put them in the loop, then I'm going to be asking the player what their name is every time and creating a new player every time. So I've already had my almost already made my first bug. So these are things that should happen before the game loop begins, because they only happen once. So this is more of like setup. So what I'll do is before the game loop, we'll do like game setup. And then this is where we kind of set up all those like sort of beginning things. Because these are things that are going to be the same regardless of the situation. I mean, basically happen once and then the game begins to do the loop. Now when the loop actually begins, the idea is I want to ask the player, input, do you want to fight? And again, the idea is that square brackets, if you've ever played like really old text-based games, they would put the square brackets around the letter so that you know you don't need to type fight, you just need to type F. Okay. Do you want to fight? Defend. Or quit. Okay. And then here we go. So then what we do is we just create like an if statement for each one. Okay, so if the player, and this input needs to be saved in a variable. So the player's choice equals, so if choice equals F, okay, then what's going to happen is we're going to do player, because that's one of the characters, dot attack, and then they're going to attack the goblin, and then the goblin will attack the player. And then we will check the win conditions. So what did I call that function? Win conditions. Then we will check, well actually, we'll check the win conditions at the end of the loop, you'll see. So that's what happens there. Now, if the choice equals D for defend, what's going to happen is that you're going to have higher defense for that round. So we'll just say player dot defense plus equals 2 for that round. But then the goblin's going to attack you. But they're more likely to miss in this case. Goblin dot attack player. And then we will then take that defense back. So player dot defense minus equals 2. Okay. And then if the player quits, so if choice equals Q, in that situation, then we're just going to break the loop. So just break the ends of the game. Game's over. Okay. And we'll just write print game over. Always good to put print so that way it's like descriptive. But again, once all these ifs have played through, then what's going to happen is we'll run win conditions. So we're going to say if win conditions, and then we pass in player and goblin to see if like hey have either of them won. And if that returns true, because again, if the goblin wins or the player wins, it's going to return true, then we would break the loop as well. The game's over. Okay, and again, if that doesn't happen, then the loop will just repeat itself. So it'll just keep asking you for input until either you quit the game or you've won. And yeah, so let's try that out. Theoretically, this should all be good to go. Okay. So let's run that Python textgame.py. What is my name? Alex. Do you want to fight? F. Alex hit goblin for, oh, oops. Again, not JavaScript. I don't need to put these dollar signs. In Python, you just need the curly brackets are enough. Okay. Cool. Anywhere else I did that? Okay, we're good. So I will quit. Let's see if the quit works. Q. Quit works. Perfect. Python text game. Okay, so if I do fight. Oh, I said my name is F. Oops. F fails to attack Goblin. Goblin hit for 3 damage. They have 7 less. Oops, there's another dollar sign I didn't take out. Right over there. Okay, let me quit again. Alex is my name. Fight. Alex fails to attack Goblin. Goblin fails to attack Alex. Okay, Alex fails to attack Goblin. Goblin hits Alex for 4 damage. They have 13 left. Alex hits Goblin for 2 damage. They have 8 left. Alex hits Goblin for 4 damage. They have 9 left. Okay, and you can just keep playing this. And then I can, hey, let's do a D. Okay, and see only the Goblin attacks, but the Goblin fails. Then I go to fight again. Oh, and Goblin fails to attack Alex. Alex hit the Goblin for 2 damage. And I win at the very last moment. Okay, and again, you can make it more complicated. Like you can then add like another option for like spells, and then that would take them to like another option for different types of spells, and each of those spells can have different like ways they play out, effects they have on the player, like increasing defense. Like again, you just keep adding sort of more complexity to it. And then you can put this loop inside of a bigger loop. Because see, this loop just simulates one battle, but you could put it inside of another loop that represents a bigger, wider game. Okay, that's literally all a game is. It's just a bunch of different loops. And when you think of an RPG, it's just a couple different loops. There's like the main game loop, and then every once in a while you trigger a battle, which triggers a battle loop. And once the battle loop is over, you're back to the main game loop, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And the game keeps looping until you either turn off the thing or whatnot. But yeah, again, um, this will be in the video description. There is a link to a repository where I put all the code for these videos, and it'll be in this code will be in this Python 2022-2 folder. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy. Oh yeah, and it's December 25th, so Merry Christmas.